All right, folks, we'll go ahead and kick things off. So, good morning. Welcome to this week's session of the Power Platform Master Series. Pretty excited about this one. We've got Copilot in front of us, and want to do what we can to demystify everything that is Copilot right now. We realize and acknowledge that there's a lot of Copilots across various parts of Microsoft's technologies, and so we've brought in Chris Laughinghouse and Chris Simmons, two very passionate and very knowledgeable individuals around Copilot to do what they can to demystify, somewhat. So without further ado, so we can maximize our hour together, I will turn things over to Chris Simmons. Chris, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jeff. And again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that attended. As you can imagine, the topic of Copilot is a very complex one, but a very fun one. We have a lot of people that ask us on a regular basis all things about Copilot. There's a lot of misunderstandings about certain things and what they all mean. So that's what we're hoping to do today. Do want to clarify that today is not about explaining Copilot Studio and the features of that. Our dear friend Remy has already done that presentation, so feel free to look back at that recording. As all things happen, right, there is advancements and new features that are added, and we might mention that again. So, feel free to, reach out, let us know if you have any questions. We've got an amazing team monitoring the chat here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with a poll, as we often do, right? There are a lot of different Copilots, and we want to understand what Copilots might be in use today within your organization. What are you taking advantage of? What are you checking out? We've got more questions and more polls as we go through today's conversation, but wanted to get a start here. Which one have you used? Which one have you played with? Etc. And I'm going to go ahead and respond myself, because then we get to see the answers a little bit better. All right. A lot of Copilot for Power Platform. That's great. Obviously, we're a little partial to that. Copilot for M365. That's fantastic. So we're getting some good usage here. Pretty even. Chris, this looks like a good, perfect audience for us.
Loving the Copilot for M365. That's awesome.
It's getting out there. It's getting out there.
I want to shout out we might have some early access people on this call, because Copilot for Security, I don't believe rolls out until April 1. Is that
the preview's out there, right? Laughinghouse?
Preview's out there? Okay.
I believe so.
Cool. Well, good for you for getting on the preview version if you're doing security.
The one person. Well done. All right. So while you guys are, answering that, thank you all for the participation. Let's just kind of take a step back, right? What is a Copilot? And this question comes up so often. And in fact, we've been kind of laughing behind the scenes. Gartner hosted a digital workplace summit recently. I was lucky enough to be able to attend. And this conversation in question came up quite often. And my first response was, which one do you want to talk about, right? Which Copilot are you referring to? And that usually led to some other fun conversations there, right? So a Copilot is an intelligent AI assistant that uses generative AI and large language models to assist humans with complex cognitive tasks. Now, that's a wonderful definition for that word. And, high five to marketing and the nerds that came up with that. But really, at its core, right, it is a chatbot that's using AI capabilities to do all kinds of things. And so there's a lot of terms that we're going to use as a part of this conversation. And I'm not going to sit here and drain all of these different definitions, but there's a lot of different pieces to understand that really make a Copilot, right? It's not just a chatbot. There's so much more to it, and so many more capabilities that you can take advantage of. And that theme will come back as we go through this conversation, right? So part of the big reason we wanted to incorporate this into this presentation was so that you could refer to it later, understand all the different aspects and capabilities that are driving what we ultimately call a Copilot. Now, of course, Microsoft has made this a little bit confusing as we've added many different Copilots, and it's really important to understand the difference, right? And so at its core, there are three main sets of Copilots, right? We've got Copilots that are native in a given product, right? So Copilot for Power Platform is a perfect example. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. I am a Copilot, or I'm sorry, I am a Power Platform technology specialist. And so when you're building a Power App or building a Power Automate flow, right, you've got a Copilot there assisting you in the creation, modification of those things. But so those are those in-product solutions. Then we have our first-party Copilots, and obviously a lot of people in here have used the Copilot for M365, or maybe you're interested in Copilot for sales, right? So some of those first-party Copilots are things that are products that we have created and delivered to you. And then you have the opportunity of creating custom Copilots with Copilot Studio. And again, our dear friend Remy created an entire master series based on that topic alone. So, and we'll cover a little bit of that today, but not in great detail. So those three main categories are really where these different Copilots live. So we've got these Copilots to support each and every one of those scenarios, right? So we've got Copilot for service, Copilot for sales. There's been the GitHub Copilot that has existed for quite some time now, right? Supporting you in each and every one of these areas, right? Wherever you may be working, wherever you may be, trying to get your job done. So again, we've got a couple of different ones. There's just a wonderful slide that helps show just a number of examples of some of these Copilots. Again, in products like Copilot for Dynamics 365, Copilot for Power Platform, first party like Copilot for M365, Copilot for GitHub, etc., or GitHub Copilot. We're just going to rename things, right? And then the opportunity of creating the custom. So when you really step back, Microsoft has just gone full Oprah when it's all said and done, right? We have just created so many Copilots in so many different situations, and we know that causes confusion. And we're hoping today to really help reduce that confusion as you go through and take advantage of this capability, because it is really, really cool and what it can do. But we want to make sure that you're armed with the appropriate information so you can take advantage of things. So now we're going to talk about the Copilot for M365, and I'm going to toss it over to my dear friend Chris Laffinghouse so he can explain so much more about that capability and what you can do with it.
So Simmons touched on embedded Copilots. Those are those Copilots that are inside of products that are just there to help you be more efficient and get your job done. So I saw in the chat a lot of people using Copilot for Power Platform. So if we look at the Copilot for Power Apps, that is an example of an embedded Copilot, right? It is helping me create tables inside the Dataverse. It is helping me build apps, but it's not helping me it's not have access to information outside of that realm, right? It is sandboxed to that, it's embedded. Well, when we start talking about enhanced Copilots, that's where Copilot for M365 is, because it is a combination of not only those embedded Copilots inside of like Excel to help me analyze tables and things like that, but it also has via Teams and the web, the ability to reason over my data, and we have the ability to extend it. So with that, just quick overview for anybody that hasn't heard of Copilot for M365, right? So this is a Copilot that is grounded in your business data. So what does that mean? That means it has access to the graph. That is your inbox, your OneNote, your OneDrive files, SharePoint files that you have access to. So we got to remember that permissions are always respected and enforced, right? So not only is it helping you, respond to emails and things like that, it can reason over your data to help you find the answers internally that you're looking for. Well, as we step into it, we can also extend/customize it, right? So this is where we may have other data systems. Like, for instance, I work with a CRM every day that is a separate system, and I may be in a meeting and need quick questions, things like that. I may have an operations database. I need to know invoice level or invoice status or inventory levels, things like that. So those are all examples of where we might want to go in and extend it. So here we have three classic ones, right? So I need a very fast, efficient, I'm in Teams all day, every day anyways. So wouldn't it be nice if I could just go in there and do a vacation request, right? or some other type of employee request, or expense management. All of these are great examples of quick impromptu things that I want to be able to extend and take care of that will not force me to leave the canvas that I'm on. So I don't have to go to another system to go drill through and then get a simple answer and then come back with that answer. I can do it quickly and efficiently, right? Because remember, the whole goal of Copilot is to be your personal assistant. So to make things easier and faster, right? So efficiency is key. So a couple of things when we're talking about extending Copilot for M365, there's kind of two things I want you to think about. Do we want to add knowledge? In other words, do I have unstructured data, knowledge-based articles, things like that, that wouldn't it be great if while my users are searching for things, they had access to all of this data as well for it to reason over, right? So not only SharePoint content, not only OneNote content, not only all this graph content, but I want to add all these other knowledge sources that I might have. And then there's skills. And that's what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, where I may want to go check the status of an invoice or an inventory level or create a vacation request, right? So they're kind of like Alexa skills. When we go add a skill to Alexa, it's because we want to go do an action to take on something. So when we look at the extensibility, this is a very high level of how it works, how Copilot for M365 works, right? So when I'm in either the web or Teams and I'm using the Copilot prompt, I come in here and then it hits the semantic index. Here are our two methods. Plugins come in directly from the orchestrator from Copilot. And graph connectors is where we see that data on the graph, right? So what we're going to do is add additional data for Copilot to reason over. So what makes it so powerful is that as I'm asking it questions, like maybe, hey, what are the current notes for this project? It's going to go through my meetings. It's going to go through my emails. It's going to go through my Teams chats and look for everywhere that that project is referenced and then bring all that data, that graph, with the additional data from maybe my PMO status reports or things like that, then now I have access to all that as well, giving me a better experience. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris Simmons right now for custom copilots. We're going to circle back at the end and start doing some comparing, contrasting, and talking about when to use what. But for now, let's jump in with Chris for custom copilots.
Thank you, Chris. So, in talking through, everything that Copilot for M365 does, right? It does a lot of great things, and there's some really cool extension capabilities, but it's not always the answer. And as mentioned by Chris, is that we're going to get into the when to use what thing. But there are a lot of situations where a custom Copilot makes more sense. Exactly, right? This is the Chris show. We just need a lot of Chris's here today. When we talk about this, right, this generates a lot of, this is where people get most confused, and that's fair, right? Is it, well, all right, so you've talked about this, and now you've got these custom copilots, right? And I can tell you from just experience, and if it makes you feel any better, right, we have the same confusion and, conversations internally. So our dear friends in Canada had this wonderful slide that we had to share, just because we thought it was wonderful, is that, in all things low code, man, everything comes back to Copilot, right? Lots of function and lots of focus, I should say, around what we're doing in the Copilot world. And so before we get into custom Copilots, let's take one more opportunity for a poll here. So have you built a custom Copilot? Have you had a chance to play with this? Have you deployed one, right? We've got some customers that have done some great work on this. And we, a number of us have helped there, but we're seeing customers get really creative and excited. So I'm going to say only for funsies, because they don't allow us to deploy custom Copilots internally yet. But that'll be a fun day when that happens. Let's see what we've got going on here. No, not yet. That's fair. Not allowed. That's fair. We did want to call out, that this is a safe space, right? So feel free to throw your comments and concerns and questions in the chat. right? There's all kinds of conversations that we're having with customers around, there may be some fear in doing this. We actually had this as an answer as a part of this poll question of no, because I'm too scared. But we didn't want to make anybody seem, you don't want to call out scaredy cats or anything like that. So, but we understand, right? I talk to customers all the time that they're still a little hesitant, and that's okay. So we want to make sure that you're in a safe space to have this conversation. This is only being recorded and shared with everybody. Licensing and deployment strategy is definitely a big holdup. I understand that makes a lot of sense. It's a great question. And so we won't get into this today, but there is full ALM capabilities there, and we can talk about that. So maybe the first of many times in this call to say, reach out to your local Microsoft rep. The team that you work with regularly today, they can certainly get the right people involved to help you go through that. Because that's a fair question, and that's a common one and a good one to ask. So we can, the Microsoft team is ready to help and assist in that topic. So a lot of not yets, a couple of only for funsies. That's okay. I'm just glad to see that everybody's playing. No deployed yet, so that's very telling. So we've got a lot of customers that are on the cusp of this. So hopefully that number changes as we do this again. Okay, so why might you build a custom Copilot? What does it take to create a custom Copilot? And this really gives you all the power. And one of my favorite things about creating custom Copilots is that you have all of the control, right? And so for those that may be familiar with the bot framework and the Azure bot service that has existed for some time, right? That's how this all began, right? We had a team on the Azure side that was, an engineering team that was building this capability. The fun fact is those engineers are now on the Copilot Studio team. It's one team behind the scenes. So they would tell you, start with a custom Copilot, right? And that's a really, really important factor. And we'll cover that a little bit more in detail, right? But you have all of this control and all of this capability to design as you see fit, right? Whether you're using some of our pre-built models and the pre-built capabilities we have there, or if you have, your own custom models that you're working with within Azure OpenAI Studios or Azure AI Studio, things that you can do to manage very specific use cases with a custom Copilot. And so we talked about some examples for the Copilot for M365. Here are the examples that we have from a custom Copilot perspective, right? You may need a very, very specific answer when dealing with certain scenarios, right? Whether it's IT service, if it's a customer-facing scenario, of course, we need very, very specific answers given to our customers. And I think a very easy and common example that we like to share is things within human resources. There's lawyers for a reason, right? And they've defined an answer to certain topics so that when we ask that question, we always get the same answer. And when those scenarios come up, you're going to need a custom Copilot to ensure that very specific answer. Generative AI is a lot of fun and obviously does some really, really cool things, but we don't want legal answers through the use of generative AI, right? We need very, very specific answers. I'm sure a lot of lawyers will agree with that, and especially the ones that have gotten bit by ChatGPT quoting things that didn't exist, right? So in those scenarios, when we absolutely have to have a very specific response, a very specific data source that's generating this information and generating these responses, when those Gen AI capabilities are taken advantage of, building those custom Copilots is absolutely the right choice. And those are our favorite examples. We'll get into that. And so, the key and the most important piece, as mentioned previously, is that there's a lot of cool things that our customers are doing with Azure AI Studio using the OpenAI capabilities and even some of the more traditional AI ML tools and features, right? And so we don't want to lose that, right? We still want to take advantage of that. And those are still very, very valuable. And even as your data science teams are getting into even prompt flow engineering and all the cool factors there, right? You still need to take advantage of that, and you want to take advantage of that. That's very, very important. And so with the capabilities of Copilot Studio, you are able to tap into those existing investments in the Azure AI space, right? Now, that's just with the assumption that the interface to the investments and the models that you created in Azure AI require a chat experience, right? So that's the point, right? When you're creating a custom Copilot, you're creating that chat experience on top of those models. And that's a great thing, right? Lots of use cases for that. Sometimes that's not what you're trying to do. Maybe you're trying to use it in analytics. Maybe you're trying to use it in automation, right? We have answers for that as well. That's not a custom Copilot, but you can use that custom Copilot to create that chat experience on top of that model. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? There's a lot of capabilities within building custom Copilots of very specific answers, but then for certain topics, you may need to reach out to a generative AI or excuse me, custom built model, right? Some generative AI features. So there's, differences there, but always want to come back to the fact that you have the opportunity with these custom Copilots to take advantage of your existing investment in the Azure AI capabilities. And one of the other really important features here is also not just about what you can consume, but how do you deploy this, right? There's a lot of channels that you may want to deploy this chat experience, right? Copilot for M365 is in Teams, it's in the Office stack, but sometimes that's not the right answer. Maybe I need to deploy it to my external website or to my SharePoint site, or I need it to support WhatsApp and WeChat and maybe Facebook, right? There's all sorts of scenarios where you may need to deploy this kind of experience outside of just what Copilot for M365 provides. And so using a custom Copilot gives you that opportunity to deploy this information or this capability through those other channels. Now, for those of you that have been kind of following along for a long period of time, right, you may have noticed the fact that a lot of this sounds very, very familiar. And I just want to take a moment to ask this question. And it may seem silly, but it comes up more often than you might think. So we've had in the Power Platform the Power Virtual Agent capability for quite some time now. And in fact, the conversations that we had about Power Virtual Agents, say 18 months, 24 months ago, were few and far between. We talked about it. We didn't talk about it a lot. Now we talk about Copilot Studio seemingly every minute of every day. And so this is a much more exciting topic. So I just want to understand, question for you guys. The next poll here is, are you aware that Power Virtual Agent became Copilot Studio? Haven't seen the poll pop up just yet. Hopefully we'll get that loaded here shortly. But I want to understand, who's aware of that, right? Now that may be obvious, right? Old news, wanted to make sure. But some people, I talked to people just last week. They were like, well, I thought that was the case, but I really didn't know. So good. We are doing it seems like the vast majority of you folks knew that already. That's great. I feel good about that. It means we're watching our master series. Very fun. But you're also paying attention. Well, I shouldn't say that. You're just also having that opportunity to come talk to your Microsoft folks, and they're getting that message out quickly. For those that were not aware, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're understanding this capability and this change, this evolution, right? Because Power Virtual Agents didn't just, get renamed to Copilot Studio. It truly is the next evolution of the capability, right? It's more than just a chatbot. And that's, I think, a really important point that we wanted to make sure to get across here. We've done here's all things about Copilot Studio, but we didn't talk about our old dear friend, Power Virtual Agents, right? That product was a really great thing and has evolved into now what we call Copilot Studio. So hopefully now that you've been here and you've seen this all, we see 22 of you are well aware of the fact that is the case. So we're so glad that we have that opportunity to clarify that point. I'm glad I asked this question because it was kind of, burning down below. Is it really, the thing that these people know? Are they aware of this as we continue to get that question? So fantastic. All right. So now we've talked about Copilot for M365. We've talked about custom Copilots. Now the $1 million question, which one do I need to use? Which one am I going to use? So the two of us are really going to kind of get into this, right? And so the thing to know is that there is one tool to rule them all. Copilot Studio is the tool that not only enhances your existing Copilots, but it is also the product to create custom Copilots. And of course, that's not confusing at all, right? So we wanted to make sure you understood that, right? Custom Copilots, you go to Copilot Studio, the extension management and configuration of those pre-built Copilots is also Copilot Studio. So we did create one tool. We made it relatively simple there. So lots of great things going. I mentioned the Azure AI Studio. Always want to keep calling that out, right? That is the extension capability there. One tool to rule them all. Yep. Plus the AI Studio. So I guess it's not one tool to rule them all. That's fair. Thank you for that feedback.
It's hard. Counting's hard. It's fine.
No. It's all good. It's all good.
Counting's hard.
So then we also have the extend, capability, right? So to kind of break into it a little bit further. So, the different pillars, right? There's the Copilot for M365. There's the other first-party Copilots. You'll notice we have them in two separate columns because they do have different factors, different approaches. Your custom Copilots and anything other Copilot experiences we're bringing into Copilot Studio. So it is really that one tool, but from that one tool, you can extend with all of these other things, right? And I keep using that word extend because there's a lot of things I can do inside Copilot Studio, right? I'm authoring my topics, I'm defining those paths and how those topics will be handled. But when I need to create those very specific things to my business, I want to use these extension capabilities, whether I'm writing code and using the bot framework and bot service to extend it with specific skills, or I'm using the Azure AI Studio that I've mentioned 100 times already to create my own custom models and LLMs, or again, Azure Cognitive Services comes up all the time. The full stack of the Power Platform connectors is available as well, right? So take advantage of those 1,200 plus connectors or any custom connectors you may have built. And, our dear friend AI Builder is still doing some really cool things out there as well. So, taking advantage of all of those capabilities is still core and key to what we want you to accomplish and take advantage of with Copilot Studio, whether, again, I'm extending one of those first parties Copilots, or I'm creating these custom Copilots for your business as well. So Chris, when we get into extending the Copilot for M365, right, there's a lot of options there. So you want to give a little bit of a extra color to that topic?
I'm going to go the opposite way, and I'm going to say that what you see here on the slide, right? So we've got extending Copilot on the left, custom Copilot on the right, and you can notice there's only two real areas that you can extend Copilot for M365, right? So we can add data to the graph so that we can reason over it, and we can do plugins for specific actions, right? So we have a specific trigger that's going to come in, and we're going to go do a thing and retrieve some data and bring it back. So those are our two options, right? You don't have control over the orchestrator. You can't do authored topics. So you're very, very limited. So keep in mind that the whole goal of extending Copilot for M365 is to increase the user experience, to make things much easier for the end user. It is not to build an HR bot, right? If we need an HR bot, we don't want to look at extending. We want to go custom Copilot because we're going to need to scope that content. We're going to need control of those conversations, and we want it very purpose built, right? So that's, this slide just demystifies a lot on where those kind of controls are, where something stops and custom begins. And Chris, you're still muted. Oh, that's right. You wanted me to go through these. Okay. So
please, if you don't mind.
I was like, all right, I thought I was just going to answer and turn it back over to you. Yes. So the hardest part for our customers in every conversation, and internally for that matter, right? I have conversations with my peers all the time. It says, customer so-and-so has this great use case for extending Copilot for M365. And then when we hear it, we're like, well, that should probably be a custom Copilot. And so the meat of today is really centered around that, right? Where we are right now, and kind of giving you the loose, I'm going to say rules. I know, Simmons, I know you're going to disagree with that word, but the rules that we use to kind of say where it should go. And the reason that we like to say loose is because, remember, we are evolving this product at breakneck speed. So things that we say today that Copilot for M365 or even custom Copilot cannot do will likely change in the next month or two, right? So you're going to get more and more blending, more and more overlap, where it's going to get more difficult to choose. So some examples. When you want, oh, all right. Well, all right. We're just going to go on to the next slide.
Sorry. My bad.
All right. So when you want to connect Copilot to other data sources, right? So ServiceNow, if you're using ServiceNow and you leverage the knowledge bases out of ServiceNow, that is a great example of things that I want in the graph, right? Because that is either all of my organization or most of my organization is going to want to have access to that. So if they're looking for something in the knowledge bases, why am I going to make them go to that system to go search? I'm certainly going to leave that as the option, but I'm also going to include that data in the graph so that if they're looking through it through Copilot, it's exposed there as well. That is a great low-hanging fruit. By the way, we have over 150 graph connectors today. So a lot of these things that you're looking to connect to, these connectors largely exist already. Again, so anytime we want to increase knowledge, or we want to say, hey, I'm in a meeting or I need something very quickly, very ad hoc, right? I don't want to build a whole process around this. I just want to go fetch or initiate something. Just want to go do something. Plugins, awesome. It's great for those, okay? When we want to do a custom Copilot, right? That's where, hey, I want a tightly control over this, or I want scoped content, or, I want to add additional rules around the orchestration and the plugins that I use. If I need more control, if it needs to be its own thing, like if we're replacing a business process, then that's going to be a custom Copilot. And let me grab control real quick just so that I can forward on my own without Simmons taking me over. So here are some examples, right? And these are ones that we've been talking about through the deck, right? So on the custom Copilot side, an HR bot, an IT service bot, right? Multi-turn. One of the rules that we're going to get to is going to be, hey, if I need to go interact with a third-party system through my Copilot, am I going to be one turn or multi-turn? And so if the answer is one turn, that's possible for extending a Copilot. Very easy to add a plugin, go fetch a piece of data, go do something. Yes, absolutely. But if we're thinking that it's going to be multi-turn, then it really needs to be custom today. So, and how much control you need. That is the other big thing is, so not only is it multi-turn, how much control do you need over that process? That's going to push you to custom Copilot. Control over the triggers and phrases and the scripted content back and forth, right? So if you ask your business, hey, is a generative answer okay? Where we're allowing the LLM to summarize this data, put it back, or do you need a very scripted, specific response? If the answer is, well, it's got to be very scripted, we need to answer it this way, that's a custom Copilot, right? So hopefully the 8 scenarios on the screen are kind of giving you guys a good example. If you have questions or you have an internal use case that you have, if you want to very quickly kind of describe it, happy to give you our gut reaction. Obviously, going into a lot of detail is going to be problematic, but we can give it our best shot. So let's start talking about boundaries. This is a slide that, you won't see Microsoft produce. We don't produce a lot of prescriptive content. And the reason we don't is because the ball is always moving. The products are always evolving, so these things change. So everybody that's viewing this, and if you're watching it later, just realize that at the end of the march, these things are true, right? So extending Copilot for M365, I'm always a huge fan of it, but there are some boundaries, right? We've already said handling multi-turn conversations. It can't do it today. Plugins are single turn. today. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Be action-based, right? So we can go retrieve data and things like that. The ability to go execute things is coming. Very quick, nudge, nudge again. But today, can't, okay? So if from plugins, we want to collect variables to use throughout the conversation that we're having in Copilot later, no, can't do that either. That is a custom Copilot thing, right? So when you think of plugins, think of, I'm going to go execute something, have it run, return that data, and that's the end of it, right? The only time that that data is going to get reused by the LLM is when in Copilot for M365, when you actually submit your prompt into Copilot, what happens is it gets grounded in the graph data first. So it's going to take the question and it's going to attempt to do a search, right? A semantic search across the graph content, pull stuff together. And so it's going to do 4 things. It's going to grab your prompt, the grounding data, the chat history, right? So everything in the previous history, the system prompt, which is what Microsoft has built into it as well, which gives it its rules for engagement and all that. And then that's what gets submitted to the LLM, right? So that's why you can't set variables and things like that, because it's only the chat history. That's the only way it will know what that plugin gave it. And so, and it loses all understanding. So for instance, let me give you an example. If you say, what is the status of invoice 12345? And it returns the status as pending approval. And then if you say, who is the approver? The plugin is not going to know what you're talking about. It loses the context of the invoice 12345, right? So you have to say, who is the approver for invoice 12345? So you know who to go kick and say, approve it. So that's what we mean, right? That's a good example. Plugins today don't provide citations to sources. That's really, really close. And there's some question when we go public preview, you know. So the other thing is, the important note at the bottom is extending Copilot Frame 365 today is in private preview. And what we mean by that is the plugins are in private preview. Everybody can extend the graph today. So, but half of the extensibility is in private preview. That should go to public preview very soon. You know, if only there were a Microsoft event coming up, you know, within weeks, you know, maybe in the month of May, that may be where we may do some announcement. Again, this is all rumor, so don't hold me to this. So the other thing is execute functions in specific apps. What do we mean by that? So number one, today, Excel, if you're in the Copilot for Excel, it is bounded within Excel. It does not have the same that if I'm in the Copilot for Teams and leveraging the web and things like that. And I can't do things like with this response, oh, create me a PowerPoint from that response. No, that functionality is not there today. Again, not there today. Think future direction. So now let's switch gears. Let's talk about when to use a custom Copilot, right? Well, I want external users to see it. Oh yeah, totally. Hands down. The minute anybody says users outside the company, boom, custom Copilot. That's an easy one. Publication channels outside of M365 products, right? So the only way to use Copilot for M365, if we're talking about the extensibility, is either through Teams or through the web, right? Those are the only 2 channels. So custom Copilots have a plethora of channels. I mean, we had a whole slide. It was like a NASCAR slide, logos everywhere. The other thing is scripted responses. We talked about this before, right? When you need to tightly control that topic and have very programmatic responses. Yep, 100% custom Copilot. This one gets a little asterisk, right? Scoped to specific content. This gets a little asterisk because technically with a plugin, so I can trigger a plugin and that plugin can be scoped. However, you have to understand that because you're initiating a plugin, it's single turn today, but it's single turn. So it's not evaluated when it goes to the LLM and things like that. It is a plugin that goes to that specific content and gets it. So it's quasi-scoped. So yes, it is scoped. Yes, we're reasoning over that content, but it's not included in the generative AI larger process, and it's not multi-turn. So typically when we're scoping in specific content, we want a multi-turn generative AI reasoning. And so custom Copilot is the way to go. And the last one, which super obvious, but we had to throw it in there, support non-licensed users. So not everyone in the organization might not be licensed. You might have field workers, things like that might not have access to it. And if it's an HR bot, everybody in the company needs access to it. Obviously, it's an IT service bot. Only knowledge workers need access to it. So probably you'll be fine with that. But so just know you might have scenarios where, hey, it's internal users, but we don't have them licensed and they need access to this. Questions. I'm hoping you guys are crushing the chat because
we're managing the chat. I think everybody's listening intently to you, right? So
as I babble on and on and on. Yes. So the disclaimer is that this is the day these limitations across products kind of exist. These are known. These are actively being worked on. This will not be the case in the near future, at least for some of them, right? So just remember, prescriptive guidance is only good for a limited time. The products are going to change. That's why the number one answer that we give all the time, especially when I get a 2-sentence use case, is it depends. Let's talk about it.
Yep. So lots of stuff coming. Clearly some mentions of build coming up, as someone was kind of alluding to, that Chris guy wouldn't stop talking about. So when in doubt, blame Chris. It's fine. We're used to it. We blame each other. Total Spider-Man meme there as well. So lots coming, lots to talk about. This is really, really great. As mentioned, just as an example, not all of these things are going to get fixed or changed, right? Copilot for M365 is never going to be an external Copilot. Copilot for M365 is never going to be a purpose-built Copilot, right? It's a productivity Copilot, and it's amazing at that. We do some really, really cool things even internally and with other customers, right? But when you have those very prescriptive ones, that's likely going to be more of those custom Copilot worlds. They may change that. They may evolve that, right? Product roadmap to TBD, but more to come there. And Laughing House looks like he's really dying to say something.
I'm dying because we forgot one thing. So Simmons and I had an earlier conversation. We were debating with another internal person that was trying to get their head around this and said, well, why would I buy a Copilot for M365? Why wouldn't I just build a custom Copilot and replace Copilot for M365? Fantastic question. Because that is like in the low code space, we talk about, you can buy Microsoft's first party CRM, or you can use Power Platform to build your own CRM, right? You can build exactly what we built. With Copilot for M365, that's going to be impossible. And the reason is because you won't get the embedded channels that all the embedded apps have. And then also access to that backend graph data. Yes, there is the graph API, but reasoning over it and doing all that is pure product IP. So it's impossible to build a custom Copilot that with the same functionality and depth and capabilities of Copilot for M365, but it's a great thought experiment.
Absolutely.
Done. It's all you guys.
There's a lot of Chris did it in the chat. All right, so Samit, hold on just a second. I think we got a couple more slides we're going to run through, and then we'll take some questions. So let me take control back from the other Chris, and we got one more poll coming up here. So just to wrap up for a little bit, hopefully this conversation really cleared things up, but we want to get your opinion. We did see someone say this was great content, and I'm very happy to hear that. We're really hoping that this really cleared some things up, really kind of differentiated some situations, right, that you may be considering or thinking about. If you're still confused, that's okay. If you're more confused, that's okay as well. A little bit of a bummer, but we'll deal with it, right? But hopefully this helped. We didn't think it was going to be perfect, but just in case, wanted to get your feedback, right? We do better with your feedback, right? This content is for you, so anything we can change, anything that we can adjust. So we have these conversations a lot. So for those that this did a lot for, we're very thankful and grateful that you were here and had the opportunity to listen in and understand. More Chris is always a thing. Thanks, Chris, for saying that. A little bit, but I still have some questions. Not surprising. We kind of figured this is where everyone was going to vote. So, it's about a 50-50 split right now. So that's even better, right? That's a win. So yeah, some great stuff here. Now, just wanted to share some resources with you, right? We always got to show some links. For those that aren't familiar, we have a Copilot studio in a day. If you're aware of the fact of the Power Platform and all the things we do on that side, we have an in a day for darn near everything. There's dashboard in a day, there's app in a day, there's flow in a day. So of course we have Copilot Studio in a day. So if you want to go check out that product and understand a little bit more, it's a great tool, great resource for you to take advantage of. There are all kinds of other documents that you can find in the blog and demos and all kinds of stuff. We want you to try to play with this as much as possible. There aren't a lot of free trials for some of this stuff, as you might expect or think, right? In Power Apps and Power Platform and a lot of the Office stuff, right? We're all about free trials, but GPUs aren't cheap, as we all know, right? So there's not as many free trials for this kind of stuff, or limited. And in fact, even us as TSs who usually have very elaborate demo environments that we can use to show things to you, they don't even give those to us, right? We're even limited on what we can do internally. So, we will do everything we can to help you learn, help you experiment, POCs, stuff like that. The good news is that if you are thinking custom Copilot, right, it's $200 for 25,000 messages. So pretty low cost there, to consider. But again, reach out to your local Microsoft rep if you have any questions, want to dig into that a little bit further. Do we have another? What's left here? Oh, I think it's just the final poll question of every single master series. What else are you guys looking for? What other topics are you interested in? Jeff does an amazing job coordinating all this for us internally, making sure that he's got some great speakers lined up for you. I didn't get this catch last week's meeting with Ken, but it looked like it was a smash hit. And Ken's a great guy, and he's got some great information and loves to talk. If you ever get Ken one-on-one, the trick is never to get him to talk; it's how to get him to stop talking. He loves to share. So, and I hope he sees this at some point. And you tell him I said that too. We're big fans. All right, I think we're good. Thank you everyone for the time today. We've got 10 extra minutes to answer some questions. So, fire off in the chat. Sameep, I think you were there for just a second. Hopefully I was pronouncing that name correctly. If you want to come off mute for half a second and answer that, or raise your hand again, we'll start calling on people for questions, and we'll address them as best we can. So yeah, go for it.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So I'm trying to implement Copilot here for a particular business use case that we have with our SharePoint platform. We have about 1 million documents in our SharePoint platform. I've used the Copilot product in Teams, and I've seen that I don't always get the results that I'm looking for, meaning it's not returning results from the documents from our SharePoint platform. So in this use case, would you suggest to build a custom Copilot or use the out of the box and extend it? Or should we do our own custom solution of taking the relevant documents that we need out of the SharePoint platform, which is a huge headache, and put them in Azure Blob Storage, do our own chunking, embedding, and do OpenAI calls to interrogate those documents? What would be your suggested approach for this kind of a business use case?
So
thank you.
Yeah. Laughing Owls, go for it. I know you want to jump in real bad. You and I both do. So I'll let you start.
Yeah. So quick question. When did you first start testing? And the reason I ask is because Semantic Index was being rolled out and got rolled out through February. And so rolled out and turned on and completely indexed and finished are two very different things. So like, is this, hey, we were testing yesterday or weeks ago?
We did this over a period of time, probably earlier than February of this year. So
Okay.
maybe we should give it another shot.
Okay, I would. So there are a couple things to unpack here. Yes, I would absolutely give it another shot because Microsoft was rolling out Semantic Index as fast as we were unloading GPUs off trucks, right? So we had to get the hardware in, then we had to turn it on. And we turned it on, it wasn't, so don't think of it like a binary switch that we turned it on for the entire tenant. So we turned it on for the tenant, but then we did workload by workload by workload. So I would definitely test it again. I would also open a support case, probably in parallel, and just get the Microsoft people to go research and say, hey, is Semantic Index turned on in my tenant? And is it indexing these specific SharePoint sites? And that needs to be the case. Support cases are free. It will take them days to come back to you. So I would open it up and then just let it go, even before you begin testing, because it's easy and doesn't cost you anything. I would do those two things. The other thing I would kind of remind you, so when we were talking about indexing content, remember we have a 4 meg limit. Now, one of the things that throws people off is a 4 meg limit. That's not a file size limit. That's actually when we extract the text from the file, the text blob cannot exceed 4 megs. So, which is something like 1,500 pages, you know. So in my extensibility deep dive, I've actually got an entire slide dedicated to this where I break it down to how many words on average for a page and how many pages is that. But it's a ridiculous high figure, so you should be okay from that standpoint. I've only seen a couple of times where we've had PDFs that were just ginormous that actually pushed past that and we had to fragment. Most of the time it's absolutely fine. But yeah, my recommendation would be to initially retest, and then if it's still not working to your heart's content and you come back and support has said that yes it is and those sites are being indexed, then that's when it might be time to sit down and say, okay, we might need to go this Copilot. I would also want to understand kind of the questions that you're asking and things like that, and how much content are we reasoning over the graph, and does this need to be more scoped?
Yeah, so just to kind of, the other thing to think about, right, and Chris was kind of getting there, right, is that when it's all said and done, if you want and need more control over how that data is scoped and how that information is processed, right, creating your own models and building it on a custom Copilot might be the better answer, right? So this goes back to the it depends, right? When you're talking about millions, if not, thousands, if not millions of documents, right, you may want to control that a little bit more. So, there's a lot of great things Copilot for M365 can do. And as Chris just mentioned, it's doing even better things, right? And that will continue to evolve. But if you ever have that, like, I need to control kind of how it reasons over that data, then you're going to want your own model and through a custom Copilot, right? So there's those different situations and how much control you want to have over a given scenario, which leads to you're going to have to take a little bit more responsibility for creating the thing that you want it to do, right? There's a lot of pre-built stuff that we can do, and it's going to help. But if you need that level of control, then you have to take that responsibility and build some of those pieces.
Yep.
Great question.
Thank you.
Fantastic question.
Thank you.
All right. From the chat, another Chris has asked a question, Mr. Macaluso, about leveraging Azure OpenAI and Copilot. And what I want to just flat out say as an answer to that is that is not an A or B situation. There is never an OpenAI versus Copilot conversation. Copilot, custom Copilots are the interface on top of Azure OpenAI, right? So if you've created a custom model and you need a chat experience on top of that model, then you would use a custom Copilot to do that. Now, you may need to use that model in other ways, right? And so I mentioned earlier Power Automate, or maybe you're factoring it into some sort of analytics of some sort, right? Or whatever. However you want to use that model, you can use it in different ways. But if you're trying to create a chat style experience on top of that OpenAI model, then you would use a custom Copilot through Copilot Studio. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Feel free to come off mute and clarify.
I think that's good. I appreciate it.
Yep. All right. I think some of those questions were answered. Anybody, feel free to jump off mute if your question was not answered. Throw up your hand, please. Good conversations. Oh, yep. Another question. Follow-up questions?
Sorry, it's me again. So
just
a quick one. So I've noticed that when I use document intelligence in Azure for parsing documents, there's no support for Office documents. There's support for PDF documents. The support for Office documents is only available in 3 regions in preview version. What is Microsoft's roadmap to have more of the Office documents supported for embedding, chunking, and vectorization?
Yes, the preview is only available in a few regions. So I'm trying to think of how to answer this in a politically correct way and not a Chris way.
That's hard.
I think the answer is, or a polite way to put it is, it is coming. Yes. So it is on the roadmap. You see it in preview today. The reason it's only in a few regions is because hardware is bottlenecked and getting it into data centers and everything like that. And so there's kind of a hierarchy. It's probably the wrong word, but they're slating more and more of that for other services. And then as things kind of level set and those capabilities are lit up, then you're going to start seeing some of these private previews that are very regulated to specific regions where we have enough GPU capacity go to other regions. But until the GPU capacity catches up. Now, for this one, I don't specifically know, but I know that is the case with other private previews and things like that. And I know that on the roadmap, they are doing Office documents and things like that. So it's coming. It's just, there's just not enough time and hardware in the day to get it all lit up. Just be patient, please.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better answer with timelines.
Robert, just seeing your comment here, Mr. Lassard, in the chat, like SharePoint just might not be the best place to host that data to build a custom Copilot on top of it. That goes back to, what we were talking about is yeah, we're going to make some better things to take advantage of SharePoint, but if you need a better experience or better reasoning over that data, then just having it there and pointing Copilot at it might not be the best answer, right? Using the Azure AI Studio to better model that data for the purpose of a custom Copilot might be more appropriate. So again, understanding where just some of the searches through SharePoint are good enough, and applying that to one of our pre-built models behind the scenes versus your own custom model is one of those conversations you're probably going to have multiple times depending on the data source.
Yeah, the beautiful thing, and some of the things Remy's alluding to, is the beautiful thing about the Copilot kind of evolution is it has a ripple effect across all of our products and our backends. So it's, hey, how are these things being searched, indexed? How can we get them out programmatically while still respecting permissions, everything like that. And so it's taking things that, even though these were cloud services that kind of varied across products that were using similar platforms, but still did things in slightly different ways, it's forcing everybody to get on the same page. And it's also forcing some new kind of interoperability between some of these services that didn't exist before. So there are many ripple effects, and the product teams are just burning the candle at both ends, trying to not only get the features and functionality built, but also stitch all these things together to give you the seamless experience. And just like earlier, so just today, I had a customer conversation email me and said, hey, we tested this in January, searching these OneNotes through Copilot for M365, and it was very lackluster results. I just ran the test again, and they're phenomenal. This is what I would have expected back in January. What happened? And it was like, well, that was the difference between lexical search that we were using before and semantic search that we're using now. And the OneNote in your tenant got indexed. And so now you're seeing those results. And so it's just evolving very, very quickly. So I would put it to you, is this something that you're pressed to get delivered? Because if so, absolutely. What Simmons said is I would use Azure OpenAI, and I would take care of it myself. If this is something that you're trying and doing things like that and you can slow roll it, then the easy button is to wait for the product to catch up and those SharePoint pain points to be remediated. You have to decide how much pressure and how fast you need to get this out, because you may need to do it in Azure and AI and then fold it back in later, right? If you got to have it soon.
All right, folks, we are officially 2 minutes past. Thank you all so much for the participation, the questions, the chat. It's been wonderful. As you can tell, we are very passionate about this topic. We love to talk to customers about it. Happy to share what we have learned and what we know, what we're seeing other customers do, and as the product roadmap continues. So stay tuned. More Master Series to come in the future. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Recording will be available soon. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.